Mic check, mic check. Hello. Hey guys, welcome. Can everybody hear us? Say something, Andrew. I mean, the other
Oh,
Andrew.
hey everybody. Hey.
Yeah, let's see if everybody can hear us. If they can hear us, we're gonna start. I think it should be fine. It says that's okay. You made that video. Wait, your. Hey guys. Hey doorbell. Hello February. Hi there, Karam. Hi there, Michael. Rob. Oh hey. And Manisha. Cool. Yeah, I think everybody, yep, everybody can hear it. That's great. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew, and welcome to Game Dev's Chatterbox, a small series where I chat with some really amazing and talented game devs out there and find out more about what it takes to become a better game developer, as well as their personal stories and struggles. I hope that this Chatterbox session will bring you inspiration, insight, and knowledge, which we will in return move forward for your game dev career as well. Our guest today is, let's see, yes, that way, is Andrew, who's
Hey
also
everybody.
Andrew, yeah. uh, he is the lead programmer of Below the Stone. He has been proficient with programming for approximately 4 years now and has decided to properly work on the project with Michael, who is the lead artist and I think is also in the chat of the game that they're currently working on, Below the Stone. Karam is also in the chat, I believe, and he's the musician and sound designer of the team. So, hi, Karam. Below the Stone is a rogue light procedural generated game that aims to inherit the replicability factor. It takes place in the world like Tolkien's world, where with dwarves, kingdoms, and other fairy creatures. How's it going, Andrew? Are we ready?
I'm ready. How are you doing?
I'm good as well, thank you. Tell us a bit about your personal life and how you got started on game development.
So we started Below the Stone probably like 2 years ago. Mike proposed the idea to me originally, and I was like, yeah. The game was originally based off of a different game that he had been working on with a different person. He before we worked on our project, there was a different program. He has other friends who are programmers as well, and there was a different game they're working on. But his other friend kind of went on to do different things, so that project never really got anywhere. And the original uh, idea, kind of like basically like originally it was supposed to be like an RPG type game, like a
Oh, okay.
multiplayer RPG. And then what happened is uh, Mike had the idea of like taking that and going, okay, instead of making it like an RPG, let's make it like a roguelike so that it's a little bit more, instead of it being like an RPG, because there's a lot of RPGs, people want to make. And there aren't a lot of, well, from my experience, there isn't a lot of roguelike games. There are a lot, but it seems like there's something to come from like having a roguelike,
Hmm.
and we wanted to take features from games like Minecraft, Terraria, Enter the Gungeon, take different features that we enjoy about those games, and kind of bring them together in a unique way.
That's wonderful. I see. And about your personal life, how did you get started? How did you get interested in game development?
So the first time I got interested in game development was probably um, in around like sixth grade or seventh grade. I think my whole life, I being around computers and video games, I always had an interest in wanting to know how people created stuff on computers, knowing like there were games I played as a kid. I played like when I was a kid, we had a Windows XP computer, and some of the games that I had played were like I played a lot of Lego games. There was like Lego Island, Lego Racers, Lego Rock Raiders, different games like that. There was Frogger, and I liked all those games. And
Hmm.
as a kid, I'm like, okay, who made these things and how did they make them? Like when you look at a painting and you go, wow, that painting looks so real. How did they make it? Well, they use paintbrushes. They use these different tools, and it's like, well, now how, in a sense, looking at games like works of art, how did people make these games? and I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know it was called programming or coding or anything like that. And it took me a very long time to kind of discover that it was actually that's what it was called. And I discovered that probably through I mean, I probably discovered it before this through other ways, but like the big kind of aha moment was when I discovered a program when I was like in sixth or seventh grade called Game Maker,
Mm,
and through that
yeah.
I was like, oh, this is how I can make a game. So I, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to figure out how to make games in here, and they had like the click and drag, and so that's what I did at first. And then I was like, well, okay, the click and drag doesn't have enough functionality for me to create what I want to create. And through YouTube, I discovered, there's people who like did tutorials for Game Maker, and some of them suggested the programming language that Game Maker used called GML, Game Maker language. So that was kind of where I went, oh, it's called programming, it's called coding. This is what it looks like. So that's kind of where it started. And then probably in high school, because our high school, like the middle school, didn't have these types of classes, but in high school they had classes for programming in Java, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to take these. I'm going to learn Java, and because I want to be able to create stuff with control a computer and create stuff, make games
Mm,
and stuff. So that's where I started.
that's amazing. That's a hell of a story right there. Yeah.
So I could go a lot further along with that.
I think Game Maker is a really great start for making games because at the beginning it tells you how a computer works without the actual need of coding, and then further when you want to, like you said, when you want to get better and better, you want to do certain things that those drag and click things don't work anymore. You'll have to actually learn programming, and that's
Yeah.
how you got interested. That's amazing. Um, what is your experience with balancing game development and your day-to-day life?
So that it's well, initially it was difficult
Mm,
because it's something where it's like in the here I'll be honest with you. In the beginning, I think like I wanted to know how to program, but the problem is that I always hit these points. I know this doesn't answer your question immediately, but
that's
when
fine.
I first started learning, um, I I wanted to know, but it was intimidating. It was like something where I assumed programming it would feel a lot like English because it's called a programming language. So I felt like it would be it should be something like English, and it turned out that it's not quite. So you have there's that learning curve, and as you kind of take on that learning curve of learning programming for the first time, it's intimidating. And at first, I would like learn a little bit and then give up and just go back to just playing video games. So at first, it was very slow, learning. But if you put your mind to it, you can definitely learn programming in 10 times faster than I did. But when I first started, it was like I didn't dedicate a lot of time at all to programming. And so after that, period of like that, after I took on that learning curve,
Mm,
and I started to program a lot more, um, getting into like balancing everything else. Like nowadays, uh, well, right now I don't have another job. I used to work at a grocery store. When I like after I graduated in 2016, I started working at a grocery store, and so at that time I was working on the game, and so I had to balance. Like in the summertime, I would balance, my work with uh, programming, and so the only times I could really have to code were like after work when I was exhausted, and I
oh,
do
I
have to do
see.
it. And and then the only free days were like the weekends. And one thing I've noticed is that if you wake up too late, like I have a hard time, getting up early enough. Today I've managed to do it, but
I appreciate
on
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Just like what programming, I think it's important to be able to get up early enough, because if it's really late in the day and you wake up, the day feels very short and your brain's just not in the right place.
Right.
And so to kind of answer your question in completeness,
Mm,
uh, I would say it is difficult. It's like because you have other things you have to do, you know. With work you can't, like, obviously you have work, so it's very limited time, But now, like right now I don't, because of COVID, I don't have uh I'm not actually working anymore. And that gives me more time to do programming, which is good. But the only other time that like managing, uh, you know, coding time with other time would
Mm-hmm.
probably be like with school. I'm done. I'm actually done with school now. I actually finished I got my associate's degree in computer science, and I just
Congratulations.
finished my. Thank you. I just finished my last semester in May, and from recollections, having to do college, having to balance college and programming was probably the most difficult of all the balancing situations, because it's one of those things where they give you work that you have stuff you do in class, and then they expect you to do so much outside of class, and so that comes down on me to be like, okay, I have to choose: am I going to program now, or am I going to do my homework or something else? And so that's one of those
Right.
things where it's like, I want to code, but at the same time, I need to, I need to,
Set your values, see
get,
what you do first, and all that.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't think I perfected it, but I was able to get good grades. But at the same time, it's like, I wish I didn't make as much progress on the game during those times, and I wish I could have. But it's one of those things where it's difficult because they
Yeah.
want you to like spend a lot of time out of school, so it's a lot more difficult. But it's one of those things where ultimately you have to it's work with the free time that you have, so.
Yeah, of course, of course. That's great. So talking about Below the Stone, what is your favorite project that you, so including that, I'm guessing, what is your favorite project that you have ever worked on and why?
um that's a good question. uh I don't want to. I want to think of something else besides Below the Stone, because Below the Stone is, I think, my favorite project. And the reason why is because it's the first one that I'm actually, it's the first project I'm taking seriously and really, persevering with it. This is
Mm.
actually, I would say, of all the projects I've ever worked on, this is the one I've worked on the longest, actually, for that matter. Um, because in the past, all of my other projects were just things where I would be learning programming, and I would be like, okay, I've learned this bit, and this is the bit that I needed to be able to do a certain thing, and so I try to take on that project, and then there might be something else. Like, I remember at some point in time I tried to make something where I needed to be able to do file saving, but I didn't know how to do that, and I was intimidated to figure out how to do it, and so that project never got completed.
Mm.
I forget what it was, but it was like, it could have been things like that. Some of the projects I know I worked on were like, and these were things where like I wanted to do them, but I didn't know enough about programming to complete them. But at one point, I tried to make a Minecraft mod a
I
long
think
time
just
ago.
like everybody tried to do that because it's so
Yeah,
interesting. It's so good to learn.
yeah. I think what I was trying to do was it was very simple. It was like, okay, so you blow up TNT in Minecraft with redstone. But it's like, well, what if you want to have a timed explosion? You need redstone repeaters. And it's like, well, now you need to get redstone. It's like, so I was like, well, you have gunpowder. So why can't they make it so that you can have a line of gunpowder and then light it with a flint and steel? And
Mm-hmm.
that would be a timed explosion. And it would be a little bit more realistic. And it would be like, why isn't there like or not glowstone, a gunpowder
A gunpowder,
block
yeah.
that, and I took it to like a different level, and I was like, because at the time my dad had showed me this. There was like this little block with a piece of flint on the side, and you scratch off the metal and you strike it, and it was titanium. I think it was like titanium or something, and it's like you use that to start fires if you're camping. And I was like, oh, I'll be unique. Instead of uh, gunpowder or sulfur, it'll be titanium. So it was like some random idea, like trying to like add quality of life features that I thought Minecraft deserved. Like, that's what I was trying to do.
Mm.
And there were other things, other projects I tried taking on. I tried doing. This was more recent, actually, where in Gary's mod, I did. So Gary's mod, when you make add-ons for Gary's mod, when you make content in code, they
Mm-hmm.
use Lua script, and Lua script is like a scripting language. It's embedded inside of another program, and you can use that for modding. And so if Gary's mod pushes an update, you don't have to, like with Minecraft. if they push an update and you want your mod to work in that new version, you have to be like, okay, I have to do all of these things just to make it work in this new version. Whereas in Gary's mod with Lewis script, you can just like your mod will still work in new versions. So there's like a different way that they do modding.
It
And I
sounds
tried to
smarter.
make, yeah. And they tried to make, or no, I tried to make a thing in Gary's mod where it takes all of the bullets in the game, because all of the bullets are like hit scan. So hit scan just means like it's a laser basically. It goes from one end to the other instantaneously. There's no travel time.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
tried to mod where when you shoot a gun, it could be anything. It doesn't matter what gun it is. It could be a modded gun for that matter. Uh, it'll basically replace the hit scan bullet with a physical bullet entity type thing and basically contain all of the damage information and all that stuff. And it would have travel time. And it did work, but there were like issues and I never completed it. And that was a more recent thing. And so I kind of just said, you know what, I need to work on Below the Stone. These projects aren't gonna, like that's the other thing. Like, Gary's mod or any of the other projects I worked on, they had no actual, like, I don't want to say this too early, but this is the reality of it. It's like, Below the Stone, we intend on selling it. We intend on making it. It's going to be a source of living. Right now, my income is zero, and
Mm,
I want game development to become my source of income.
of
And so
course,
those
yeah.
mods, other projects that I worked on, I didn't make them for the intent of making money. I just made them because I wanted to learn. I wanted to do these things and share them. And I think the fact that there wasn't a lot of incentive like that tied to it, and also just not knowing enough about programming at the time, I didn't really complete them. And
Right,
so
right.
Below the Stone became one of those things where it's like, this is my future. This is my Below the Stone, and any other game that comes after it. That's that's what I want people to know me for.
Yeah,
So, um, well, your original your original question was how do I balance my time, or what was or was it was the next question? What was that?
Oh, I was just saying,
What
what's your favorite projects? You answered it. It makes sense why Below the Stone is so meaningful to you and why you've been working on it so much. So now to the next question. I think you've also answered this a little bit. Is there a habit that you think contributed to your success so far?
my habit?
Yeah, yeah. If there's a
I
habit.
have, I have it right here. I'm trying to think if there's a different one because there's one word I can say that is my habit, which is perseverance.
Perseverance.
That's the word, perseverance, because it's one of those things where there's been moments in like when I was like before I was proficient where I would be trying to figure out, how does programming work? Like why does it work this way? Like why, there were all these kind of like those learning curve points where I was like struggling through it. And I had these moments where I just thought to myself, you know, is this something I really want to do? Like I thought like I don't know what my original like I, well, I knew what my original like attraction to it was, but the thing is there was like there's a deeper thing about it that I just really liked about programming. And there were times where I literally said to myself, this is difficult. Is this something I really want to do? Like I was asking myself, okay, it's too difficult. Maybe I shouldn't do it. But that's not something you
Hmm.
should be asking yourself. If it's difficult, that's not a reason to give up. That's a reason if you want to, you know, uh, if you want to get better at something, you shouldn't let the difficulties and the struggles, stop you from doing it. It's okay if it like stops you for the moment or for a day or two, and if you have to take a break from it, that's fine. But I always went back to it because I wanted to know how to make stuff with computers in a general sense.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and into this case, to make video games and stuff like that. Just the intrigue of creation on computers is what kept drawing me back. And there were times that, again, there were times that it was tough,
I see.
and I I just I almost said, I don't want to do this anymore, but I kept going back because of just the curiosity and the intrigue to be able to do it and all that stuff. So
That's amazing advice, and I think I can resonate that as well with it. Like perseverance, you need to be very. Sometimes you might feel like you're not going anywhere with whatever you're trying to do, or you can't get a hang of it. But you need to know deep down inside what what's important to you and what this means to you, even if it's
Yeah,
hard, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you feel lost. You have those moments where you feel lost, you have no direction, and then you'll have those moments where the direction comes back to you. You have those aha moments, and it's like, okay, and then it just reignites that passion to just keep going. And
Mm.
that's like, it's don't let go of that original intrigue. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Um, Now onto a more opposite, like it's a very opposite question. What is the biggest mistake that taught you a very important lesson?
Okay. Biggest mistake. Um, there were many. Uh, the one that comes to mind that I can think of just quickly is the fact that, when you're coding, you want there's this kind of obsession to perfect a little bit. There's this obsession that, the code that you're writing is perfect, but that's never true. I mean, I actually have it written on my board, I think, right there: all code is garbage. I mean, that's not necessarily true, but I use that as a reminder, to be like, the code you're writing is not going to be there. It's probably not going to I mean, it could be, but it's probably not going to be the same code. It's not going to look exactly the same in a couple months. You want your code to pretty much stay the same, because
Yeah,
you're laying down the foundation for your game. There's some code it's more foundationary. Everything depends on that code. And then there's, that. And so if you change that code, then everything that depended on it has to change as well. So you have to, there has to be perfection, but the perfection is like, not about, the implementation, but uh, it's not the implementation of the code that matters. It's the framework.
it's the framework. Mm.
It's like, I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, I made this analogy maybe a couple weeks ago, that it's like trying to build a pyramid upside down. The top is going to fall. All right. It's like when you're or a house. When you build a house, you build a foundation, but then even more so, even after the foundation, you lay out the framework. So the house, you'll see it's kind of like this wireframe system of wooden beams and all that stuff. And then after that, you put in the other things like the furniture. But the placement of the furniture depends. It depends on the shape of the house, and it depends on, the foundation and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you lay out a flexible framework that can be flexible with what you want to add to your game. Because if you want to add something and it's like, well, my foundation doesn't support it, well, then you have to change the foundation. So, um, uh,
That's a great analogy, actually. Like, I really like that. That's such a great analogy of how implementing games works. Yeah.
yeah, that's one thing I learned. I think, like, over time, I eventually had that realization moment where it's like, it's not about, when you create a function that does something, it's more about the name of the function than what's inside it. You can change what's inside the function, but if you change, like, say if you don't like the name of your function, you want to change it, but that function is used in 100 places, you might have an IDE, or a program, I don't know. You know what an IDE is, right?
Oh, I don't, unfortunately. Sorry.
IDE, Visual Studio.
Right.
Visual Studio, Notepad. Technically, Notepad is an IDE,
Mm-hmm.
integrated development environment. It's just something that
Okay.
you do your code in. Notepad stuff like that.
Right.
That's an IDE. So Visual Studio for me, like, I can rename a function really easily, even if it's used in 100 places, because it'll automatically rename it. So there's that tooling. But if you don't have that tooling, you rename a function, and you have to go through all your
Oh
files and change that
no.
name in every single place. So that's what I mean by the foundation matters. The implementation is second, you
Right,
know?
right.
So that's like the big, of all the different mistakes that I can remember, it's just that, don't, and other people will word it a different way. It's like, just don't worry too much about, uh, making your code perfect now. Wait about that later. The other thing, I don't want to take too long to answer this. I just thought of this. The
Yeah,
other
yeah.
thing, this is another like thing that I always say to myself, and this is something everyone else, if you're listening, who's a programmer, one of the things to keep in mind is don't underestimate the power of your CPU. Okay, don't do that. A lot of times I think to myself, okay, is this code going to slow the heck out of the game? Is it going to slow it down massively? And sometimes there are cases where that happens, but a lot of times, depending on what it is, it doesn't. Like you can have an array of 100,000 integers, random integers, let's say, random numbers, and say you want to get the sum of that array of numbers. Your computer can get that sum of 100,000 integers. It can do that in less than a millisecond. It can probably do it in less than a millisecond for a million. So that's just kind of like it's kind of like a mental benchmark for like, okay, yeah, computers are this powerful.
Right, right.
Like if you're using, if your programming language you're working with has a way to benchmark, like you can say, okay, here, time there. How long did it take to do this code? Kind of do those tests for yourself to see that, yeah, our computers today are very powerful. And even to a greater extent, a lot of games, like your computer has multiple cores, but most of the time your game is probably only going to be using one of them. And it would benefit massively if it was using maybe all four. Most people have 4 cores, some people have 6 or 8. But if your game could use all 4 cores all of the time, your game would run 4 times, almost, not exactly, 4 times as fast. So
Right.
even just one core by itself is powerful. So that's the only thing that popped into my head was, don't underestimate the power of your CPU, but don't think that your code is never going to because it very well could. You could have those moments where it'll bring your computer to a halt probably. So
I never thought of that actually. So yeah, that's good intake. Um, so now talking from another side, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received from someone else?
um,
It can be related to coding, can be related just to game dev, or actually even anything else.
I'm trying to think because I mean it's the best advice. The best advice was the whole, uh, you know, um, don't don't over engineer. Well, yeah, don't over perfect. Don't over engineer your code. Don't try to engineer it for things that like you don't necessarily um, are trying to achieve. Like if you're trying to go for this thing, then you should only try to code for that specific to achieve that specific effect. You shouldn't try to add a bunch of extra stuff uh, because that extra stuff could actually cause issues and you might have to refactor and things like that later on
Mm.
down the line, things like that. But it's like that was the big advice that I've heard from other people. One other thing that I've heard is don't learn uh, two different programming languages at the same time. I did do that a little bit, and I was able to get through it. But I've heard that like it actually makes it take longer to learn those two languages if you're learning them at the same time. But if you learn the one, get that good, and then learn the other, then that's better.
Mm.
Um,
I see.
I mean, you'll still have those moments where, like I remember, like there's some languages that don't use semicolons and there's some that do. And so sometimes, I mean, I don't do this anymore, but sometimes I'll like, okay, in this language, uh, they require semicolons, but in this one they don't. And I will forget to put a semicolon simply because it's just like I've done that in the past. I don't do that anymore, but like
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
one
it
thing.
happens if you're switching around so fast, so frequently, so I can understand. When I used
Yeah,
to go to university, I don't know why our teachers would do that, but they would force us to learn like two to like even three languages in the same time, and I was just thinking this is not doing me any good because I would keep on getting confused between them all. Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry for the back noise. I don't know what's wrong with the the outside right now. You can hear some of them, right? Sorry,
Just
guys.
just a time.
Oh, okay. So if it's annoying, please let me know. and I'll shut off the doors. But it's really hot. All right.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
On to a much more different question that's like non-programming related necessarily. So Andrew, I understand that you guys, since you guys are an indie game studio, you won't be, even if you are the lead programmer, you're probably doing many other things along the side, like management and other things, right?
Yeah.
Um, so my question is related to your game. I understand that it's also like you guys are aiming to launch it in a pretty soon time, right?
No, I'm gonna not necessarily.
Oh,
The
okay.
release, we're gonna leave the release as most people will say. You know, when you're working on a game, you don't want to push the date. You know,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
it's not, there are times, even if you do, you know, have good programming practices in place. There are going to be those times where there's going to be like, you know, unforeseen like things where like,
Of
oh, you know,
course.
this needs to be done before this, but you didn't realize that this had to be done. You know, like there's things that come up, you know, and so
Yeah.
that's what kind of pushes the date further back, which is unfortunate. But that's, you know, that's why people say a lot of developers will push back their dates. They try to give a roadmap for like, okay, this is what we're doing, this is our progress, so that you're not like completely shutting out the community and being like, okay, you know, we're not going to tell you what we're doing.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You want to be transparent to some extent, and like this is what we're working on, this is what's happening. You know, there's going to be and the acknowledgement that there will be setbacks, but you know, our release date, again, I don't think we should have a release date.
That's
um
fine.
but
Yeah.
it could be um well, so right now we're like in a okay, so we're in a like a pre-alpha right now, where we're only sharing demos of the builds of the game um with our patrons. And eventually what we want to do is have a Kickstarter, and have another Kickstarter, redo it better this time, and um, have release a demo so everyone can try it out. Because when you have a demo for a Kickstarter, that really, you know, changes people's minds. If someone, you know,
Right.
didn't thought, you know, I'm not sure about this project, but if they get a demo and actually play the game, that is more likely to change, you know, get people to back you. Um,
Yeah.
and so by that time, I think that the game is probably going to be like, I'm going to shift it over to like alpha. So it'll be like something where, you know, um, there's going to be a lot more features implemented, things like that. There's going to be like right now there's crafting, but oh, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. It's all right.
Uh, right now there's crafting, the level generates. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that has to be added to these features, but then there's things like AI, proper AI, adding in more entities that generate with a level, dungeons, uh,
Biomes as well, I remember.
well, yeah, we do have biomes in now. We actually do
Yeah.
now.
That's
That was
cool.
really nice. And
My
so
yeah, sorry.
um oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. My question was like, what would you do um, before and after launching your game? Do you have like a plan in your head that you're thinking that you'll have to do before and after launching your game?
um
Any
as you mean like
preps or tips on prepping before launch and what it's like to pre-launch and
uh well, for one thing, obviously, like there's, you know, there's going to be the set of features. We want to have what people call like a game loop. There's two different terminologies for game loops in my head. The one is
okay.
like more programming, and the other one is more like just gameplay related. But when people say game loop, sometimes what that means is like, you know, for us, it's you go into the caves, you know, you mine resources, you do all this stuff, and when you complete a certain, there'll be some objective that you'll have to play or complete. And then once you've completed that, you can leave the caves, you go back to the dwarven kingdom, and you can go there. You can take your items, some of them like ores, you can smelt them, you can sell certain items. Some items might be relevant to other missions or objectives that you can take on. and things like that. So the game loop is, you start in the kingdom, you go to the caves, you do stuff in the caves, you come back and you take those things that you've attained and you process them, do something with them, make a sword, make a better sword or something, uh, purchase items, whatever, and then that's the cycle. And so one of the
Mm.
things, before release is that you have to at least have that game loop, um, obviously, to have that game completeness. One thing right now is like I'm also kind of working on the main menu. I don't have the main menu isn't complete, and so obviously another thing would be like making sure the main menu is there so that when you start up the game, you get the main menu, you hit the button, generates the level. Um, the other thing was that kind of like what you're talking about, like just features, or you're like because there's also of course
More
making
like,
sure the state.
yeah, more like the Steam side. So not really necessary on the game feature, but more like on the actual building your game. The actual making actual builds and stuff like that. Because I understand you're gonna be putting the game on Steam, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, it's going to be on Steam. A lot
That's
of the
great.
Steam page right now is set up. We're probably going to redo some of the. There's all these different like art banner type things, like the background and the thumbnail and the game icon. We're going to kind of probably redo that. I don't know, or some of them at least.
Mm.
Uh,
Polish,
Add in like
basically.
when, yeah, because like when we had to do, I think like when I remember when we were first setting up for the Kickstarter. Um, One of the things that we wanted to do was have the Steam page open so that people could wish list it. Um, so we kind of like did it real quick, and so the polish with the Steam page, um, making sure other things are set up. There's a lot of stuff I haven't personally looked into it, but I guess in general it's just making sure that the what is it called? What do they call it? It's the Steamworks. That's their
Mm.
back end. The whole Steamworks, making sure that everything's set up there properly. So,
That's cool. So you guys made a Kickstarter before. Would you like to talk a little bit about your experience with what it's like to start a Kickstarter? What's it like to how do you call not interact with the backers? How's that been for you so far?
um, well, when we did the Kickstarter, the there's a lot of things. There was a lot of things we learned before we even started the Kickstarter. There are certain periods where there's certain like periods in the year where it's the best time for indie game developers to release a Kickstarter. I don't remember when the exact time periods were. We tried to go for a certain date and we kept pushing it back because we weren't ready. We were, we were making a trailer for the Kickstarter as well, and so there were pushbacks, but we eventually released. Um, and another, so timing is important. Another thing that's important is uh, well, interacting with people who see your page, having a good Kickstarter page that's it has a good length, it has a lot of important details, talks about the progress you've made, the progress you want to make, um, what you're going to do with the money you would get from the Kickstarter. Um, and the one thing that's important to note is that obviously people aren't just going to organically find your page. You have to do like a lot of marketing, which is it's that like that's the unfortunate part, because sometimes it's like, well, if you want to get a certain amount of backing, you do have to spend a certain amount of money to get people to see you,
To notice,
unless
yeah.
you're yeah, to notice you. So that's the one thing that's the hardest part about it, is doing the right type of marketing. And there's some marketing that is it it costs very little and it's very effective, and that's what you want. You want the marketing like I remember we were watching videos on like different ways you can do it, where you can use so like you get like a mailing list. You create a mailing list, and before you even start the Kickstarter, you just start finding people that will, say, oh yeah, they're interested in your game. You have to basically have to have this big build up before you
Yeah.
start the Kickstarter. And then when you launch, you have a lot of people that are, they're emailed, they're notified. You have a lot of people that are waiting for you to release the Kickstarter. And then that happens. And you have a lot of people that just start, and that happens no matter how much marketing you do, you're going to have that kind of initial, uh, you'll see that on the graphs that it's really high at first and then it plateaus. And you
Yeah,
want that
yeah.
to be as high as possible because, that plateau, whether you have, like that's the control, like you have to, it's going to plateau, but you have to make sure that you're going to reach your goal by the time you reach that plateau. We didn't do enough marketing. We didn't prepare a
Damn.
whole lot. And so there's a lot of, like you can be very, very, interacting with the people who backed with you. You can, keep connected with them. You can constantly, you know, show that you're engaged and that you care and that you're not just because there's people that go on Kickstarter and they go on there for the wrong reason. They go on there for the wrong idea of like, oh yeah, this is how I want to get back. Like some people, they just have an idea, but they have no work for it. And that's obviously not going to get you. Even if you do a crap ton of marketing, if you have nothing to show, then no one's going to back you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for us, it was like the key was marketing and planning, which we did, but not enough to get there.
What is
Um,
enough?
what is enough? That's a good question. Uh, it for if you're someone who has the thing is if you're someone who has a lot of money, you can it's not that's not a difficult question. You just say, okay, I have this much money that I'm willing to put into it without feeling like it's going to be a major loss, and you put that in, and it's like and I'm speaking about this in a very abstract way. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
put $5 in, you get $2 of backers out, which doesn't make sense. But it's like if you put in, a lot more money, then the ratios change. I think that's the way to look at it. And for us, it's like we don't have a lot of money. So the only thing, the key for us was, having enough time to get people to know about what we're doing and to anticipate it. And then, you know, to announce it at the right time where there's a lot of people just organically looking on Kickstarter to fund people, which I don't think we did that at like the perfect time. And so that for us, that's key. But if you're someone who if you've done projects before, like if you've done Kickstarter in the past, you have reputation, and that plays into you as well. So that might help us as well, because we had a Kickstarter. It might not have succeeded, but we came back, and so that might help us as well reach another future goal as
Hey,
well. So
what doesn't kill you make you stronger. So I think you guys will be fine. You guys are doing fine. The
yeah,
fact that you did it first time, and I think you got so many valuable experiences out of starting your Kickstarter for the first time. The second time will definitely be much better than the ones you did before. So
yeah,
yeah,
we that's another thing. We there was a lot of people that just from doing the Kickstarter that have joined our Discord. I think we've had so many people that have joined since then, and I don't want to say the wrong people's names, but I think Plabs was one of the people that's on our Discord right now. I think he actually discovered us. There were other people as well that discovered us as well, and a lot of them are like really really awesome people that are having awesome conversations in our general chat and posting memes and other creative stuff. And we've met a lot of other we've met a lot of other game developers as well just from doing that. So it wasn't a total loss. We gained a lot of community from that. You know.
yeah. I saw your community. So if your community on Discord, you guys have quite a big pool of people who follow your game, and that's great. I definitely think that you starting that Kickstarter was not a mistake, and it was something really valuable, and will bring nothing but good towards your game.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
on to the next question. So I asked about your Kickstarter. Yeah. If you
Yeah.
had, so this is probably a follow up to the questions that I just asked. So now that I know that you are going to actually start a Kickstarter sometime in the future, um,
Yeah.
what would be one of the main things that you guys would do differently?
Um, so one of the things is, so like for the first Kickstarter, I was actually the one that did the trailer that is on the Kickstarter. I did not have at that time. I did not have like a whole lot of video editing experience, but I tried to like I learned as I go. I had some experience. I did some video editing, but I had to kind of learn as I go and work on that. Um, but I think this time it would be great. I might have to make another one. I don't know.
Hmm.
But if we can afford it, I would want to be able to have to actually get someone who's a professional, someone who's specialized in doing video editing and all that type of stuff, so that it can be like,
Cinematography, stuff like that.
yeah. There's another terminology. There's cinematography. There's I forget what it's called, but it's like movie directing. Like there's a certain like knowing what types of transitions to use, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but so there's like I think yeah, getting someone to do the video editing part. Um, what was the other thing I was going to say?
So better trailers compared to before, you said.
Yeah, I mean the trailer. What like I was pretty impressed with the trailer I made. I
I
was
saw it. I liked it, and I see in the chat right now. I think CJ Sky said just watched the trailer on from, and he said it looks awesome.
yeah I did I really
It was
put my
great.
nose
I saw it as well.
with that. I like that. I think I thought it was really good too. When I look at it though, I think maybe this is just my mental bias where I look at it and I go, that it has that amateur vibe, which I guess is okay. But I have this feeling that like if an actual person who has done video editing for many years remakes it, it would be like it would have that professional feel. And I feel like that professional feel, not to hit my own video that I made, not to hit on it, but for the sake of success of the project, if we had a professional make the video, someone would look at that, and that would be just another factor that just goes, yeah, these guys are serious. They mean business. Because that amateur, the amateur looks, it's humble, but it's if you want your project, if you want your Kickstarter to be successful, you really want to hit all the nails.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to remember what that other thing was. That other timing. Yeah, just there. If you Google, like, there are people who will say like, these are the time periods. I believe one of the time periods is like, uh, July or August or September. Like I think it's in that time period. I think I'm not sure where if you release in that time period, it's the places where triple A games have certain times in the year where they release a game, and you don't want to release in those times because all of the game press, all of the news vendors are going to be paying attention.
All
Paying
right.
that's what it is. And so you want to release like I think January or February is actually one of those times. You don't want to do a Kickstarter in like uh, November or December. And I think we released very close to that. I mean, we reached 50% of the goal, but it could have been a lot better if it was at a different time period. But we were kind of like really antsy to uh, get it out. Even though we probably should have waited.
So
Um,
timing, better trailer to make it look more professional. I see. I think timing takes a lot of time to decide because you have to do a lot of research to understand the market and when you're doing it. So yeah, definitely comes with experience as well. That's a great
yeah.
answer. Um, so now on to another question that it's more to help out game devs out there. If you had to start from zero and what would you do step by step on becoming a game developer?
Now, when you say just like in general game developer, not programming, but just
Yeah,
game
game
development in general.
developer. Yeah.
Um,
Let's say assuming that you know all your knowledge you still have them, but you know no one and you're just starting out. What would you do step by step?
uh, I would say the first, like when making a game, uh, the first the main two the things that you need the main two things you need to make a game are going to be code and art. You need those two things. Music is important, sound is important, but you can still have a game without it, but it adds something to it. But art and code are the most important things. And if you're just someone that's by yourself and you want to be able to make a game of art and code, you can make art, but you have no game if you have code. But if you have code and you could make like, you could go into paint.net and make rectangles, white rectangles and stuff like that. It's not going to look that great, but if you work on, the art side a little bit more, if you're someone where you want to do both art and code, then you have to work on that. And
Yeah.
so programming is important just to get to bring the game to life, to bring the functionality to the game. But the art is also important to um to add that extra zap of life to it, because if it's just rectangles, it's not going to give you that feeling of immersion. That immersion factor comes with the art and how the art looks. If you're
Hmm.
making a game like in Unreal Engine, then it's all about immersion. It's all about photorealism and things like that. But
Yeah.
then you'll have games where it's pixel art, and so the pixel art, it kind of removes that level of immersion. But the immersion, I think, comes through your imagination. It comes through uh, you know the low detail and the fact that you have to use your brain to kind of fill in the gaps with the low resolution art. Um, and one of the things, I mean, also you have like a lot of newer games that use pixel art will have like those photorealistic effects. So they might use bloom. Like we're probably going to use bloom in our game, or other post processing effects, things like that that make those game. It's like you see pixel art games that use pixel art from like 2004, and you look at a game with pixel art nowadays. They have all these other things on top of it that kind of give it that immersion, that give it that feeling of like that you're almost there, but it's that retro pixel art feeling.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, it's important. It's very important to know how to code, but I don't want to take away from the fact that the art is important. And so I would say that uh, what you want to do is go on YouTube, of all things. Go on YouTube, uh, do search up like you know uh, as far as like a good programming language to get started with. I would say uh, for starters, I would say C sharp. Java is a good language, but I think it's kind of dipping in popularity. C sharp and Java are very similar in syntax, but right now C sharp is, well, that's the language that Unity uses. And I think for nowadays, people who want to get into game development, Unity is like a really really good way to kind of enter into that, because C sharp is, like it's like Java, and it has all these nice features that Java doesn't have. And it kind of for me, it reminisces with like C++. C++ would be like the second language that I would tell people to learn. Or you could even learn Python, or which has a
I
slightly
use
different
C
syntax.
sharp as well. I use C sharp, and I've done Python before, but I kind of have a feeling I like C sharp more than Python. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that Python they don't use curly brackets for their
Yeah.
functions. I don't like that.
Me neither.
That throws.
It feels
I
like
mean,
texting without putting a point at the end of a sentence.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't want to take away from Python. Python, there are some like nice things that I have made with Python. Like you can really whip up if it's a small program that you might need to do for whatever. Like it's uh, Python's standard library API has like a lot of built-in stuff like that other
Mm.
languages might not have. Every language has their own standard library with various things, and Python has this nice system where you can do a lot of different things, and then you can even very easily through a command line add on like other things that you might want to do. Like a lot of people use Python for doing deep learning AI, which to me sounds weird because it's like, if you want maximum performance, C++. But I think a lot of people who are doing AI who want to get into AI, they'll use Python. So there's different languages have different uses. But for game
Yeah, of
development right
course.
now, C sharp, C++. A lot of people who want to make their own game engines will use either C++ or just C. C and C++ are almost the same language, but they're slightly different. There's a lot of nuances. I don't want to. People get mad at me for saying that they're the same. They're not. But C is more like there's something about it that some people like with C, where it's just like there's some people that don't like object oriented programming, and there's they're right, their reasonings are correct, but there's a lot with object oriented programming that you get in like C++ or C sharp that it just depends. It's your preference.
Yeah.
But a lot of people make engines in those languages, and it's slightly more difficult to learn C++. But if you know C sharp, the syntax is very similar. So I would say, watch tutorials on YouTube for, C sharp, but don't isolate yourself to one language. Don't be afraid to learn multiple, but don't, throw yourself off by doing multiple languages. And also watch, I've seen, there are YouTubers that also do pixel art and things like that. I don't know any of the names, but, there are people who they have a lot of really good insight onto, how to make pixel art that has, nice curves to it, and, knowing how to choose the right colors and how to do proper shading and things like that.
Yeah.
So but, as far as like, if you want to start making games as fast as possible, learn the basics of coding. Watch as many videos as you can. If you have to there are online courses. There's other online courses that you might have to pay for, but if you can do that, there's like I've never done that, but they're probably really good. Where people have like these professional courses where they explain game development or programming or something like that, and it's probably very valuable.
I see.
um,
Yeah.
one day I'll consider trying like an online course or something like that, and then also learn, sprite art, pixel art, 2D art, Photoshop. If you're not doing pixel art, you can use Photoshop for like the high resolution 2D art and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think especially with like pixel art, it's such a low barrier to entry with pixel art because it's not like the classical art where you have to learn a lot like different things that you just really need to be good at drawing. But with pixel art, at some point you can even just use a mouse and you can just point and click those art, especially if we're doing like 8-bit or 16-bit, I'm guessing, related arts, right? So it's like anybody can pick up, anybody can learn, and it can go from there. And there's so many online sources you can find.
Yeah, it's like on that note, I want to say one thing
Yeah,
before
of
we
course.
next question, because I mean, like you said, pixel art. It is easy. There's something to it that's it's a very low barrier of entry. It's very easy to do. And I say this for the sake of my friend Mike. He does the pixel art, and he says this to me a lot, and I agree with this 100%. That pixel art's easy to get into, but once you start to go all the way with it, once you start to like want to make bigger, like, because you can make higher resolution. Like if you're making something that's within the scale of like 64, 64 or 128, 128, that's a lot of pixels. And so, the key to pixel art is like, it's not about like that traditional painting stuff. It's more about which pixel makes it look better. It's about pixel placement. It's about color choice, color count,
Yeah.
shapes, things like that. And I'm the programmer, and I know all this stuff. I've been learning a little bit of pixel art as well, but Mike's the one that he's the one that he's specializing in that. I'm not going to be ever as good as he is, but I've been kind of learning a lot of these concepts, myself, and that's what it is. It's when the further you go with it, it will get difficult. There's not a time where it will. There will be a time where it will become difficult, but just like with programming, if you persevere, if you want to get better at it, then it's just perseverance, you know.
Yeah, I totally understand. I get what you're saying with the learn. I think it's very important that you are learning the art related stuff and know what Mike is going through, especially because you're an indie studio. The same goes with me and my friend Giacomo. He's the artist and I'm the programmer, and the same thing. I'm trying as much as I can to show him how the programming side works on my game, even though he has absolutely zero knowledge with programming, and vice versa as well. Like he would try to show me his process and all the things that he's going through, and see what is the best way to tackle it. And I think that's very important especially in a small studio or a small team. You need to understand what the other person is going through. That way, you can make the best assumptions. Yeah. Well, Andrew, thank you so much. You gave so many good stuff, and I am very excited about your game as well. Um, Tell us how we can connect with you, and is there anything that you'd like to promote as well? Just by all means, go for it.
Okay, so firstly, have our Discord. I want to say this is the easy plug. First off, so we have a website. If you go into your browser, open up a new tab. Don't close the stream. Open up a new tab. It's strollart.com. That's STROLLART.com. That's our website. On the top of the page, we have all of our social links. We have Discord, Twitter, that Twitter, Patreon, and another one, Steam. We have our Steam page, so you can wish list us on Steam. We also have a Reddit, but it's really inactive. There's no need for it to be active at the moment until we release the game, obviously. But definitely follow us on Twitter. I also have a Twitter as well if you want to follow, but that's not as important as following the Below the Stone Twitter. My Twitter is Andrew900460.
I'll make sure to post all of this information. If you can give it to me, I'll post it below on the description of this YouTube video as well. I think that would be great.
Okay.
I should have done that before that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Right. And I think now it also goes for with the Q&A questions as well. If you guys have any questions, please do so. Ask now. Also, Andrew, would you like me to put on the trailer for Below the Stone right now? Maybe it might be a good time to put it on and for everybody to see it.
Sure.
Let me find it first, because let's see if I can find it. I found it.
Oh, and follow Karam Barge on Twitter as well.
1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Right. Okay, yeah, that was an amazing trailer, and we also got some questions as well. You said that that wasn't professional, like, but in my opinion, like that was really good, and the music works so well with the trailers. I really liked it.
Yeah, I'm probably
um,
just giving myself time.
yeah, no, 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 it was great. February asked, have there been any things that you wanted to implement in Below the Stone but couldn't because you couldn't find out how it works?
Uh, yes. And I think the way I well, there were some moments where I had that, and then those things got implemented eventually because I was like, okay, I just need to figure out how to do this, or just it's one of those things where you just have to jump into it. Um, in our game, we use chunk loading, kind of like Minecraft, where you're only loading portions of the level. And when we first started, I was like, yes, we need to do chunk loading if we're going to have a massive level. So I was like, okay, hold on, let me minimize. The stream distracts me. When you what was I saying? I didn't know where to start, and I figured, okay, kind of look at how Minecraft does it. Like, what are they like? What's going on when a chunk is loaded in Minecraft? And I kind of took that to kind of start with that. I think Minecraft does chunk loading in a slightly different way, and that's only just from looking at what happens when a chunk loads. Like I have on my computer I have the decompiled Minecraft source code, and I kind of consult that to be like, okay, what actually happens when a chunk loads? What is the process? What happens first? What happens next? So on and so forth. Um, but that was one of those things where I didn't know, where to start, and I think the way chunks load might change a little bit in the future, but the general idea is in place. There's other things like right now. Eventually, we want to add multiplayer to the game as well.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool. I would love that.
so we want to do like basically like Terraria, where you can have peer to peer. It wouldn't be a dedicated server necessarily. It would just be like um, you can start a game and you can invite people and stuff like that. So it's basically the same type of cooperative vibe as Terraria, with like if you're battling bosses. And the one thing with that, of course, is that if you're battling a boss and you have teammates, should the boss have more health? I mean, that might be something where we consult Terraria and like, okay, how do they handle that? Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe having multiple players is, you know, maybe you
And
don't need
also
to
the
bounce for the
focus point, the targets, who will they target to which player will they target to, and all that probably. And the shifting targets and when they
yeah.
shift it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can definitely see that there's a lot to that. Oh, I see. That's cool. Uh, let's see. Dorhall Games asked, did you have to cut a lot of stuff from your original version? If yes, what was it?
When he says original version, do you mean like the design plan? Is that what he means? Do you think?
I think so. Yeah.
Because like I mean, one thing like to interpret that question a certain way. When we first started, I just started coding. Like we had an idea of what we wanted to do when we first started, but we kind of like what we've been agreeing on doing is just kind of, you know, like we have like these are all the features we want. This is how the game's going to play through, and if there's any features we want to add, we'll like it's like we'll go as we go. There have been times where we've kind of questioned that because of like moments where it's like, well, we didn't consider this in the beginning, but maybe we should have created
Yeah.
a design plan so that we're not meeting those issues at that moment, but we're resolving those issues before we write any code. um, but one thing, so there's that, and then the other thing is I would say like a year after I started coding, um, I don't know if it was a year, but there have been times where I've done refactoring. Um,
Mm.
but I think maybe like a year after I started, like in the summertime, I decided to basically start the project from scratch. So to create a new Unity project file and everything,
Make sure it's all
because
clean and.
yeah, like my original intent was to do that anyway, but like to save it for that right moment where I'm like, okay, the progress is like there was I knew there was going to be a moment where I was going to be working through Unity, and there's going to be a point where development is just so slow, it's so bogged down by so many issues that I'm going to have to restart. And so I think a year after, through development, I started a new fresh project. I did a lot of copying and pasting to expedite the process, but through it I made improvements to my already existing code. Like I made improvements to the inventory code and things like that. But redoing the game, pretty much, if I remember correctly, like this was right before we did the Kickstarter, or right before we started planning for it, like in the summer. um, and It took probably like, I counted it was like 6 months to basically redo the game.
Oh
It could
my
have been
God.
less. That's the thing. Like I didn't start learning Unity on like I first discovered that Unity was free like a couple months before we started the project. And when I would talk to Mike about Unity and stuff like that, and the fact that it was like it was free to use. And I think that's where he was like, oh yeah, why don't we make this game Below the Stone that's kind of reminiscent of this other game that he and another friend made, but make it in Unity and with a different gameplay framework to it.
Yeah.
And what else? What was I going to say? Uh, the
So you restarted. You did a whole refactoring thing to.
Yeah.
It's about the question I think was, um, cut a lot of stuff from your original version, which you mean by you just cleaned you by through refactoring you found things that you cut out that wasn't necessary and cleaned up and made it more efficient.
There were some things that didn't make it through. Like at one point we used Unity. Unity has their own tile map system. And so at first that was what I was using for the level. And then at some point I said, you know what, Unity tile maps, their system didn't serve the purpose that I wanted. And so I ended up just scrapping it eventually and making my own system for making sure all the sprites tile up properly, and making sure so it wasn't fully custom.
That
so
gives
that
you
was
more
one
freedom for sure.
Yeah.
Kunai asked, where is the number in your name coming from?
I'm glad someone asked. Wait. I'm wondering if this is a person from our Discord who's because I'm glad that I like it when people ask where the number comes from. So it goes all the way back long time ago to when I first started to like get into gaming on the internet. Like I said, like at the beginning of the stream, I always was into video games. Like the first kind of games I played were like the Game Boy was there was the computer games, computers that would be on the discs, and also Nintendo. I have
I can see it.
Yep. My half. I don't want to. I'm digressing. I'm sorry, but my brother had. That's actually my half brother's Nintendo. He's like 7 or 10 years older than me. So when he was a kid, he was a kid during that time period when the Nintendo was a thing. And for some reason, he had 2 of them. And when I was a kid, I had the opportunity to play it a lot when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And like this was like 2002, 2003 probably. And so that was the other, like Game Boy, NES, computer stuff, and then later on the GameCube, the Wii, Nintendo DS, stuff like that. But the PC games were always there, and the internet was one of those things where like one day, I remember this. One day, my dad brings me into the room with the computer and asks me what this gray box is, and he tells me that this gray box is going to bring video games and music and videos to my computer, and it was a internet router. That's what it was. And it was the internet. That's what it was. It was the first time we got the internet. It was this gray box, no Wi-Fi. It was Ethernet. And I heard video games, free video games, and I was like, and so that was kind of what got me into like, okay, trying to find all these games these new games on the computer. And that kind of led me down this path of eventually, I could go on more detail about this with like Flash games and things like that. But then I learned about, I discovered Roblox. So this is where it ties into the question of the numbers in my name. Roblox. In 2008, I discovered Roblox through advertisement links on websites that basically had Flash games. That's how I didn't discover it through Google or anything like that. I discovered it through web ads, terrible web ads. And I went to go, oh, Roblox is free. You can build stuff. So I created an account. And it said, choose your name. I said, okay, my name's Andrew, so I'm going to try Andrew. And it said that name was taken. And I
Of
was,
course,
for
yeah.
like 10 seconds, I was mad. I was like, what the heck? Why can't my name be Andrew? And then this website suggested some names to me, and all of them had like 6 digits in them. Some of them were different. Um, and the one that I chose was Andrew 900460. So it was somewhat random. I don't know how they generated the number, for Roblox's website at the time, but that's how I got my name. And I just stuck with it ever since. I thought, you know what, that was my username on Roblox. And, at some point in time, I just decided, this is going to be like my moniker, my internet name, essentially. Some people have different, internet names. And I'm like, well, I want people to say at least Andrew, because that's when I hear Andrew, I go, oh, that's me. So I can, it's not like a random, so I've always stuck with it. So
What a great story. Wait, I think there's, Manaki asked, oh, I don't think this is music related. What about copyright and stuff? What if people steal your music, etc.?
That's a good question. I'm going to tell you what I know.
I think Karen
and what I
here.
know.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, he's listening. I'm going to tell you what I know. And all I know is that I assume that when you, and this is probably totally wrong, maybe I should look into this. Mike and I should look into this. But from what I understand, it's like when you create something, it's yours. I know there probably has to be more to it. Like there has to be some, this person in this country has the copyrights to this the creation. You can't just say I created this because, and here's a date proving it. I mean, maybe you can. I don't know the exact copyright laws. I just assume that it's like when you create something, like if I take a piece of paper and I draw something and people love it, that no one's gonna try anything because I'll be able to show the original, and people would assume, they can carbon date the paper and be like, oh yeah, that's the original one because carbon dating or something. Like that's I should probably look into it because I just assume that, but that's probably wrong about copyright.
No, I mean, I think that's, law is complicated anyways. So I think Mike is probably the expert in that as well because he works with the administrative stuff, right? As well.
Yeah.
Mostly. Yeah. February asked, will the game have platypuses, making it better than the other Andrew's game? Because I said that I don't have time to add another platypus character in my game.
I don't know. Maybe something like a platypus. Maybe I don't know. We want to add a large variety of creatures. Like each biome might have its own creatures.
Ooh, so platypus could be his thing.
It could be something like we have planned for like a swamp biome, but I don't know if platypuses really live in swamps, but we might have some biome that kind
lake?
of a lake, something like that. I mean, we're gonna have biomes that have water in them, but some biome where it's like, oh yeah, platypus would live there.
Yeah,
something like that. Some fantasy character that reminisces of platypus. Maybe.
Oh, I think Mike said, yeah. The word you're looking for is intellectual property, coming from what you said with the songs. So yeah, I think, yeah, that's the one.
Similar, but a slightly different thing.
Yeah. A company is also helpful with copyright. I'm just reading more comments to see if there's any more questions. If they're not, I think we can end it here. A handy bucket to throw all your intellectual property in. To answer the question Michael. To answer the question quickly, it is a contract that only Kerem and I can use the music with dates and everything, and only the Below the Stone. That's how we protect the rights to the music. That makes a lot of sense, and it feels very fair as well. So yeah, I think that's it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining for joining the stream. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being the host and giving us so many good insights on just your game dev journey, as well as so many useful tips and stuff. If you guys enjoyed it, please go check their game out, Below the Stone. I will post down the link in the description at the end of the stream. And with that being said, thank you again so much, and have a great... Is it a Friday? Yeah, it's a Friday. Have a great Friday. All right. Thank you so much. See you.